Mark sat quietly at the edge of his small kitchen table, a single candle flickering on top of a store-bought cupcake. It was his birthday, but there was no party, no balloons. Just him and his little daughter, Leah, who had drawn a happy birthday card with crayons. She looked up at him with a smile that could melt stone. "Happy birthday, Daddy," she whispered. Hugging him tight, Mark smiled and kissed her head. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said softly. He didn't have the money or energy for celebrations. He worked long hours at a small mechanic shop just outside the city, ever since Leah's mother passed away. Birthdays were simple, quiet, and sometimes sad. As Mark was about to blow out the candle, his old phone buzzed loudly on the table. He checked the screen. It was from Benny, his coworker at the shop. Emergency repair call. "Someone's broken down on Desert Road," the message said. Mark sighed. He didn't want to leave Leah. Not tonight. Not on his birthday. But he also knew every extra dollar counted. He looked at Leah Pumpkin. "Daddy has to help someone real quick. I'll be back soon, okay?" She nodded, used to it by now. Mark grabbed his jacket, toolbox, and keys, and walked out into the cold night. The road was dark and empty. With only the headlights of Mark's old truck cutting through the dusty air, Desert Road was outside city limits. A place with no lights, no traffic, and nothing but sand and rocks. As he drove deeper into the quiet night, something strange happened. His radio went silent. GPS froze, and a sudden static buzz filled the truck. Then he saw it, a silver-blue glow in the distance, flickering like a broken street lamp. Mark slowed down, his eyes narrowed. That wasn't a car. It looked like some sort of strange metal pod. Half buried in the sand, Mark stopped his truck and stepped out, toolbox in hand. As he got closer, he realized this wasn't human. The pod had symbols glowing on its surface, lights blinking in odd colors, and smoke curling from the back. He took a careful step forward, and the door of the pod creaked open. A soft light poured out, and from the shadows, a figure stumbled out. It was a woman, but not a normal one. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and glowing faintly. Her hair shimmered like silver threads. She held a small child in her arms. Both shaking and scared, Mark froze for a moment. Not sure what he was looking at, the alien woman looked up at him with terrified eyes, then whispered in broken English, "Please, ... help us." She collapsed to the ground, weak and out of breath. Mark didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, caught the child in one arm and the woman in the other. He didn't know who they were or what kind of danger followed them. But his heart told him one thing: these two needed help. He gently placed them in the back seat of his truck. Covering them with a blanket, the child looked up at him with curious, glowing eyes, but said nothing. The woman whispered again, "Don't let them find us. Please." Mark didn't ask questions. He drove back quickly, checking his mirrors again and again, wondering what them meant. The sky behind him remained dark, but something in his gut told him this was just the beginning. Back home, Leah was still awake, reading a book on the couch. When Mark came in carrying the alien woman and her child, her eyes went wide. "Daddy." "Who are they?" she asked. Mark gave her a gentle smile. "Guests," he said. "They're staying with us for a while." He laid the woman down on the couch, checked her pulse, and tried to stop the bleeding on her arm with a clean towel. Her skin was cold, but alive. The child stayed close, silent but watching everything. Mark didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room, sipping cold coffee, staring at the strange metal pod he'd parked behind his garage. His birthday had started quiet and lonely, but now Something strange and dangerous had entered his world. As the clock hit midnight, the woman stirred, opened her glowing eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Mark looked at her and replied, "You're safe now," though he wasn't sure if it was true. Suddenly, his truck's radio, still parked outside, crackled to life without the keys inside. A deep voice spoke in a language he didn't understand, and then everything went silent again. Mark didn't sleep that night. He sat in a chair near the couch, watching the alien woman and her child breathe slowly under a blanket. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the old clock and the soft hum of the fridge. Outside, the strange pod sat hidden under a tarp behind the garage. Still blinking softly in the dark, he looked at them again. Zyra and her child, that's what she had said her name was before falling asleep. Mark had seen many things in his life, served in the army, worked late nights, raised a daughter alone, but this was different. The next morning, Leah walked into the kitchen rubbing her eyes. She spotted Zyra still lying there, her silver hair glowing softly in the morning light. "Daddy, is she still sleeping?" Leah asked quietly. Mark nodded. "She's tired, sweetheart. Let's not wake her yet." Leah peeked at the small alien child, who looked about her age. He sat silently on the rug, clutching something that looked like a glowing crystal. He didn't speak, but when Leah smiled at him, he blinked slowly and gave the tiniest nod. Mark packed Leah's lunch and sent her to school. Telling her to say nothing about the guests, she nodded seriously. Understanding the unspoken danger, once she left, Mark turned to Zyra, who was now awake and sitting up slowly. She winced and touched her shoulder where he had bandaged her. Her eyes met his, full of quiet fear and gratitude. "You should not have helped me," she said softly, her voice still shaky but clearer than before. Mark shrugged. "I couldn't leave you out there." "Birthday or not?" Zyra blinked. "Birthday." He chuckled. "Yeah, yesterday was my birthday. Guess saving strangers is how I party now." She looked down, silent for a moment. "Where I come from, helping others is not normal." "It is." Rare Mark raised an eyebrow. "Well, on Earth, we try to help when we can. Especially someone with a kid." Zyra glanced at the door nervously, then whispered, "They will come. They always come. They track my kind. They don't stop." Mark's face grew serious. "Who's they?" "Shirak," she said, her voice suddenly sharp like broken glass. "My past." Mark didn't press further. Not yet. He had questions, but he could see the fear in her eyes. He stepped outside and walked toward the garage. Behind it, he uncovered the pod again, up close. It looked like a mix of metal and light. There were no bolts, no wires, just smooth silver and glowing symbols. One side was cracked from the crash, and inside were strange tools and a seat shaped for someone not quite human. Mark stared at a blinking red crystal. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. He didn't touch it. Something told him it wasn't just decoration. He covered the pod again and returned inside. Zero was standing now, wobbling a bit, but stronger than before. Her child stood next to her, holding her hand. "You shouldn't go near the pod," she warned, "the tracker inside. If it wakes fully, it will scream to the sky." "Scream to who?" Mark asked. Zyra looked out the window, her voice low. "To hunters." To him, Mark didn't like the sound of that. "Then we need to disable it." She nodded. "But we must be careful. Even touching it wrong can make it louder." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. "You aliens don't make anything simple, huh?" Zyra almost smiled, but the fear remained. She turned and sat again, her child curling beside her like a shadow. That evening, Laya returned home. She walked inside and found the alien boy sitting quietly on the floor again. She sat across from him, pulled out a deck of cards, and said, "Want to play?" He didn't answer, but after a long pause, he reached out and picked a card. Laya grinned. "That's the spirit." Mark watched from the kitchen, surprised how his alien children adapt. They didn't care about species or planets. They just saw another kid, but then something changed. Outside, the wind picked up. The sky turned an odd purple shade. Mark stepped onto the porch and looked up, far above. 3 red lights moved in a triangle across the sky. Silently, too low to be stars, too strange to be planes. Mark's heart sank. He rushed back inside. Zyra checked the tracker. She was already standing, her hands trembling. She pulled a small device from under her sleeve, flashed red, and screamed in a pitch only she could hear. "They've found us," she whispered. Mark grabbed a flashlight, his old army pistol, and turned to Laya. "Take him and go to the basement." "Now, Daddy, now," he said firmly. Zyra looked at Mark, her face pale. "You don't know what's coming?" He gave her a small, brave smile. "Maybe not. But I'm not letting anyone take you." The house creaked under the growing wind. The porch light flickered, and outside, the red lights began to descend. The red lights faded into the clouds, leaving only the sound of the wind whispering against the windows. Mark held the pistol steady in his hand, waiting for a knock, a crash, something. But nothing came, only silence, heavy and sharp. Zyra finally lowered the strange device in her hand, the red flashing, slowing down until it dimmed completely. Her shoulders relaxed, but only a little. "They were searching," she whispered, "not landing." "Not yet." Mark set the pistol down on the table, his jaw tight. "You'd better tell me who exactly is after you. Because I'm putting my daughter in danger. And I don't play games with her life." Zyra sat down slowly, her silver hair catching the faint glow from the lamp. Her child leaned against her side, silent and watchful. She looked at Mark, her glowing eyes heavy with memories she didn't want to speak. But finally, she began. "My name is Zyra," she said. "I was born on Orvani, a world far from here. A place where power decides everything. I was not born free. My family belonged to one of the ruling houses we were expected to marry. To trade our lives for alliances." Mark crossed his arms. "And you didn't want that?" Her lips trembled. "I was chosen to marry General Shirak. He was older, ruthless. A man who wanted not a wife, but a trophy. He wanted me because I carried blood of an old line. To him, I was a key, a tool to expand his power." Mark's face darkened. He had seen that look in soldiers before, men who wanted control, who treated people as objects. He clenched his fists. But he let her continue. "I was young, afraid," Zyra whispered. "But when I discovered I carried life inside me, my son, I knew I could not let him be raised in chains. So I ran. I stole a ship and hid in the dark between stars. I've been running ever since." Her son pressed closer, his small hand clutching her sleeve. His glowing eyes met Mark's. And for a moment, Mark saw nothing alien. Just the same fear and innocence he saw in Laya. "Shirak hunts me," Zyra continued, her voice hardening, "not because he loves me, but because I shamed him. In his world, no one escapes. To him, I am unfinished business. He will cross galaxies to take me backward to end me." Mark leaned back, trying to process it all. He glanced at the covered pod outside through the window. "So that thing in my garage. It's basically a giant target." "Yes," Zyra admitted. "The tracker inside still breathes. They will find it." It is only a matter of time. Mark rubbed his forehead. Great. Just great. On my birthday, I get cake. And the day after I get aliens, generals, and death squads. For the first time, Zira let out a small laugh. Soft and broken, you could have left us. Many would have, but you didn't. Mark shrugged. I know what it's like to fight for family. Lost my wife years ago, raising Leah on my own since. When you've got a kid depending on you, you don't quit. You don't sell out. Their eyes met, a quiet understanding forming between them. Both single parents, both fighting battles larger than themselves. Later that night, Mark tucked Leah into bed. She whispered, "Daddy, is she scared?" "Yes, sweetheart," Mark answered gently. "But we're going to help her. That's what we do, downstairs." Zira sat near the window, staring at the sky. Her child slept curled against her, but her eyes were restless. "You should not risk this," she said when Mark returned. "If Shira comes here, he will burn everything around me." Mark shook his head. "If he comes, he'll have to go through me first." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to measure his words, then nodded slowly. There was strength in her eyes now, the kind that comes from being reminded you are not alone. The hours passed, midnight approached. Mark dozed lightly in his chair, pistol on the table beside him. Zira's child stirred in his sleep, the crystal in his hand glowing faintly. And then it happened. The pod outside came to life. Its lights pulsed faster, louder, until even Mark could hear the faint hum. He ran out to the garage, ripped the tarp away, and saw the symbols burning bright red. "Zira!" He shouted. She rushed to his side, her face pale. "The tracker is awake." The hum grew sharper, almost like a scream tearing through the night sky. Mark's stomach dropped. If anyone was listening in space, they would hear this. Zira's hands shook as she grabbed a tool from the pod, trying to cut a glowing vein of light running along the side. Sparks flew. The hum wavered, but it didn't stop. Mark pulled her back. "Careful. You'll blow the thing up." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "No, it is worse than that. If it screams too long, Shirak will come himself." The hum grew into a roar. Red beams shooting into the sky like a flare. Mark and Zira stared up, their hearts pounding, far above. In the blackness of space, something stirred, and on the ground, in Mark's small house, two children slept unaware that their lives were about to change forever. The sky was no longer still. The stars above Mark's house seemed to blur, as if something massive had passed between Earth and space. The pod behind the garage had finally gone quiet, its red glow fading into ash gray. But it was too late. Mark stood outside, eyes fixed on the clouds. The wind had picked up, fast and dry, kicking sand into the air. A storm was coming, but not the kind he was used to. This one had a sound, a strange, low hum, like machines hiding behind the wind. Zira stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the sky. "They heard it," she said simply. "They are coming." Mark didn't ask who. He already knew. He rushed inside and locked every window, every door. The house was small, with old wood and thin walls. It was never meant to be a fortress. Zira helped him push the couch against the front door, while her child stayed close to Leah. The lights flickered once, then twice, then died. Now only candlelight lit the room, soft and trembling, just like their hearts. "Basement," Mark said. "Take the kids down." "Keep them quiet," Zira hesitated. "What will you do?" He lifted his old army pistol, wiped dust from the handle. "What I was trained to do." Zira looked at him with something between fear and respect. She grabbed her son's hand and Lia's, and led them into the basement. The wooden door creaked shut behind them. Mark moved to the front window, lifting the curtains slightly. The storm outside was full now. Sand flew through the air, making everything a blur. But then he saw its three shadows walking toward the house. Not running, not rushing, just walking. As if they already knew no one could stop them. Mark's grip tightened on the pistol. "Come on then," he whispered. "Let's see what you're made of." The first knock was soft. Polite even. Mark didn't move. The second knock was heavier. Firm. Then a voice spoke, not from the door, but from inside the house, speaker system Evan, though the power was off. "Zyra of House Vilan," the voice said, deep and smooth. "You cannot run forever." Mark's stomach turned. The speakers hadn't worked in years. "Open the door," the voice said. "Return what is mine. And no one has to bleed." Mark stepped into the middle of the room. Pointing the pistol at the front door, "You've got the wrong house," he said loudly. "Try again." The door suddenly flew off its hinges, smashing across the room and breaking the table in two. Sand poured in like water, and with it came the shadows. Three tall figures stepped into the room. Wrapped in dark armor that shimmered with energy, their eyes glowed red, and their movements were smooth, too smooth. Mark fired once. The bullet hit one in the chest and bounced off. The figure looked down at the burn mark, then back up at Mark, not angry, not scared, just disappointed before they could move. A bright blue beam shot across the room, striking one of the armored men in the side. Zyra stood at the top of the basement stairs, holding a strange alien weapon. Smoke rising from the barrel, her eyes blazed. "You will not touch my child," she growled. The hunters turned, now seeing her as the target. One of them raised his arm, revealing a weapon hidden under his skin. Mark tackled him before it fired, slamming him into the wall. The other two rushed toward Zyra. She fired again, missing. But forcing them to dive, one hit the bookshelf, knocking over a stack of old photo frames. Zyra ducked behind the couch, reloading with shaky hands. "I can't hold them long," she shouted. Mark grabbed a broken table leg and swung it at the second hunter. It cracked the side of his helmet, sparks flying out. But the third one was moving toward the basement door. Zyra screamed, "No!" Suddenly, from the shadows, Lai appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a flashlight. She shined it straight into the hunter's eyes. The light seemed to confuse him, his steps slowing, just enough for Zyra to fire again. The beam hit his shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. Everything was quiet again. Three hunters, now downed, their armor cracked and smoking. Mark leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. That was not fun. Zyra rushed to her son and Lia, pulling them into a hug. "Is it over?" Lia asked, her voice small. Zyra shook her head slowly. "No. These were just scouts." Mark wiped sweat from his forehead. "Then next time, we take the fight to them, outside." The storm began to clear, the wind died, the sand settled. And far above the clouds, something much larger moved slowly through the stars. Waiting, watching, Chirac had heard the tracker, and now he was coming in person. The morning sky looked calm. To calm, the storm had passed, but Mark felt no peace. His house was a wreck, door smashed, furniture broken, walls cracked with burn marks. But the worst damage was invisible. Mark stood in the yard, shotgun slung across his shoulder, eyes scanning the open sky. He hadn't slept all night. Every shadow made him tense. Every sound made his heart race. Zyra sat inside. wrapping her son's arm with soft cloth. He had been hit by flying debris during the fight, not seriously hurt, but scared. Leia brought him water and tried to make him smile. Her human kindness broke through the alien silence like sunlight through clouds. Mark walked to the garage and uncovered the pot again. He stared at it, angry now. "I should have destroyed this thing the second I saw it." Zira joined him. "Quiet and pale, it would not have helped," she said. Shirak was always coming. This only gave him a reason to hurry. Mark looked at her. "You keep saying his name like he's a god. I don't care who he is. If he wants you, he's going to have to crawl through fire to get you." Zira opened her mouth to respond, but froze. Her eyes turned toward the sky. Mark followed her gaze. A ship appeared, not from above, but from behind a cloud. Silent and smooth, shaped like a dagger, it floated just above the ground. Humming with power, not landing, just hovering. From its center, a door opened, and a single figure stepped out. He was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, armored in silver-black plates that shimmered with purple light. His face was hidden behind a sharp mask. But his voice cut through the air like a blade. "Zira," he said calmly. "You've run long enough." Zira stepped in front of Mark, her alien weapon shaking in her hand. "Not one step closer," she warned. The man lifted his mask slowly, revealing a face that looked too perfect. Too cold, his eyes glowed faint red, his skin pale like polished bone. "Mark," he said, turning toward the human. "You are brave. I respect that. But this is not your fight." Mark raised his shotgun. "It is now." Shirak didn't flinch. "You're a single father, working a dead-end job. Raising a child alone. I know your type. Always looking for meaning in someone else's mess." Mark narrowed his eyes. "You talk too much." Shirak stepped forward. Not fast, just bold, like he feared nothing. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, glowing cube. "I offer you this," he said. "Wealth, technology, cures for any disease. Power your kind has never seen. Give me Zira and the child, and this world becomes yours." Mark stared at the cube. For a moment, he thought about it. He thought about Leia, her future. All the things he could fix, all the pain he could erase. But then he looked at Zira, standing in front of him, trembling, not from weakness, but from the memory of chains. And he thought about her son, so quiet and kind. Now hiding behind a broken chair, Mark lifted the shotgun, pointed it straight at Shirak's chest, and said, "Shove your cube." Shirak sighed. Not angry, just disappointed, he turned away, then suddenly spun back. His hand raised, a blast of force hit Mark, sending him flying into the garage wall. His back hit metal, and he dropped to the ground. Groaning in pain, Zira screamed and fired. Her beam hit Shirak in the shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't fall. He turned to her, face full of rage. "You dare strike me." Zira fired again, but he dodged. Closing the gap fast, he struck her across the chest, sending her crashing into the dirt. Leia ran out of the house, yelling, "Stop it! Leave them alone." Shirak looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, the alien child stepped out behind Leia, holding the same glowing crystal Mark had seen before. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and the moment it lit up, the ground beneath them shook. "No," Shirak growled. "You're not ready to use that." The boy stared at him and whispered something in his own language. The crystal lit brighter. Mark coughed and stood, holding his side. Zira crawled to the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her voice calm but strong. "If you want me." "Let them go." Shirak stopped, eyes narrowed. You would return willingly? She nodded. If you leave this place, the humans. The children untouched, Mark stepped forward. His face bloody. Zyra. Don't. She looked at him. Smiled sadly. Some of us were born to run. Others were born to protect. Shirak raised his hand. Signaling the ship to open again, Zyra took one step toward it. But the crystal in the boy's hand pulsed again, this time like a siren. And deep underground, something ancient began to wake. Asterisk, the earth shook beneath their feet. Not from Shirak's ship, but from something older. Something deeper. Zyra froze, staring at the glowing crystal in her son's hand. Mark stood beside her, blood on his cheek, his breath uneven. Shirak narrowed his eyes at the boy. You activated it, he said coldly. You don't even know what you've done. The boy said nothing, but the crystal in his palm pulsed again. This time sending out a wave of blue light that spread across the ground. The wind stopped. The ship behind Shirak flickered. Its lights dimming for a second. Mark looked at Zyra. What is that thing? Zyra's voice shook. It's not a weapon. It's a key. A key to what? Mark asked. Zyra hesitated. A buried defense system from the old worlds. Something my ancestors built to protect us. I never thought he'd find it. Shirak took a step forward. That key belongs to me, he growled. You were meant to hand it over the moment your child was born. That was our agreement. Mark stepped between them, shotgun still in his hands. She doesn't belong to you. You can't protect her, Shirak said. You can't even protect your own home, Mark smirked. Blood on his teeth. Try me. Shirak moved like lightning, striking Mark across the chest, sending him flying backward. The shotgun hit the ground and skidded away. Zyra's son dropped the crystal as Shirak reached for him, but before he could grab it, Leah ran forward and kicked the glowing stone toward her dad. It stopped beside Mark's hand. Pulsing quietly, Mark reached out, not knowing what would happen. As soon as his fingers touched it, the pulse jumped. Wrapping around his arm like a warm thread of energy, Zyra shouted, No, it's not meant for humans. But the crystal didn't hurt Mark. Instead, it fused into his palm. Glowing brighter, the ground rumbled again, and from beneath the garage, metal roots burst upward like vines, forming a circle of light. Shirak turned, now cautious. What did you do? Mark stood, the glow now spreading up his arm, across his chest and into his eyes. I don't know, he said. But I think it's time someone stopped you. From the circle of light, an ancient shape rose, a silver shield and a weapon not of earth. Both humming with alien energy, Mark grabbed them without hesitation. The weapon changed in his grip, adapting to him, becoming part of him. Zyra watched with wide eyes. It chose you, she whispered. Shirak growled. You don't know how to use that. Guess I'll learn fast, Mark said. Shirak charged forward, roaring with fury. The ground cracked beneath his feet. His fists glowed with burning energy. Mark blocked the first blow with the shield, the force sending shockwaves through the yard. He struck back with the alien weapon. Blue light flashing as it hit Shirak's armor, sparks flew, dust rose. And the two men fought like titans in the dirt. Zyra held her child close, watching. Torn between fear and hope, Leah stood beside her, holding her hand, eyes wide. You gave him the key, Zyra whispered to her son. The boy nodded. He's the only one who didn't run. Mark ducked a punch and slammed the shield into Shirak's chest, sending him staggering. You fight well, Shirak hissed. But this ends now. He lifted both hands and fired a blast of raw energy toward the house, aimed at the children. Zyra screamed, No. But Mark was faster. He threw himself in front of the beam, shield glowing as it absorbed the impact. He dropped to one knee. Smoke rising from his arm, Chirac walked forward, ready to finish him, but suddenly, the crystal on Mark's chest lit up once more, stronger than ever. A beam of light shot from it, not as a weapon, but as a signal, far above, in space. Something ancient and watching finally answered. A second ship appeared in the sky, sleek, silent, silver like moonlight. It hovered above them, and a voice echoed in Zyra's head, speaking in her language. "Bloodline confirmed," it said. "Defense mode activated." Chirac stepped back, his face filled with panic for the first time. "No," he whispered. They woke it. The ship fired a beam of light, not to destroy, but to capture. Chirac was lifted into the air, frozen in place, sealed in a glowing pod. He screamed, cursed, but could do nothing. The ship rose higher and disappeared into the stars. Taking Chirac with it, Mark collapsed in the dirt. Exhausted but alive, Zyra rushed to his side, her hand on his cheek. "You're okay?" she whispered. "You did it," he smiled weakly. "You still owe me dinner," she laughed, tears in her eyes. "I'll cook you anything." The kids ran over and hugged them both, and for the first time in days, everything was quiet again, but they all knew. Deep down, this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something bigger. A week had passed since the fight, but Mark still woke up in the middle of the night. Not from fear, but from silence. The danger was gone, but his mind still remembered the moment Chirac stood in his yard, full of power, full of hate. Now, all that remained were memories and the strange mark on his hand, a faint glow that pulsed softly whenever he looked at the stars. Zyra and her son were still living with Mark and Laya. The garage had been turned into a hidden workshop, where Zyra worked on alien tech, trying to fix what was left of her old pod. Mark didn't ask where the glowing shield had gone. After the fight, it had melted back into the earth, as if it had served its purpose. "Maybe it only wakes up when there's something to protect," he said once. Zyra nodded. Or someone. Each day felt more normal now. They had breakfast together, did chores, fixed what was broken. But something had changed inside all of them. Leah and Zyra's son, who had finally shared his name, Chirac, became best friends. They played in the backyard, built sand castles, and even started teaching each other their languages. Sometimes they would sit by the broken pod, drawing pictures of the stars. Zyra spent more time smiling now. She cooked meals, helped with repairs, and even laughed at Mark's bad jokes. One morning, Laya came running into the house, holding something. "Daddy, look what I found." It was the birthday card she had made for him, torn during the fight. Crumpled under the couch, Mark held it gently, staring at her shaky crayon drawing of him and her standing beside a cake. "You never got your birthday dinner," Leah said sadly. Zyra stood in the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Then we fix that tonight," she said with a smile. That evening, they set up a table in the backyard. Under the stars, the lights were soft. The food was strange, some alien, some human, but all delicious. Zyra had made something called sea key bread that puffed up like clouds and tasted like warm honey. Chirac and Leah had made decorations using paper, paint, and some glowing stones Zyra found in her pod. Mark sat at the table, looking at everything around him. "This might be the weirdest birthday party I've ever had," he said. "But also the best." Zyra raised a small glass filled with blue liquid. "To Earth," she said. "And 2 second chances," they all cheered, even Chirac, who said his first word in English that night, "family," as the night grew darker. Mark stood and looked up at the stars. You think he's still out there? He asked. Zaira walked beside him, her voice calm. Yes, but he's locked away for now. And even if he returns, we'll be ready. Mark nodded, then looked at her. So what now? Do you fix your ship and leave? Zaira was quiet for a moment, then looked toward Leah and Tirak, who were chasing fireflies in the yard. She smiled softly. I think. For the first time, I don't want to run. Mark didn't speak. But something in his chest felt warm and full. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Zaira and Mark sat on the porch, sipping warm tea. I was alone for so long, she said. I didn't know kindness could still exist in the galaxy. Mark chuckled. It's rare here too, but it's still hanging on. She looked at him. Her voice softer. You could have walked away that night. It was your birthday. You had every reason to say no. Mark shrugged. You were a mother with a scared child. No one should be alone on a night like that, not even aliens. She reached out, touched the mark on his hand where the crystal had once glowed. It chose you because you chose us. He looked into her eyes and smiled. Guess this birthday gave me more than cake. Behind them. Inside the house, the kids laughed in their sleep. A photo of all four of them now sat on the living room shelf and out in the quiet sky. A single star blinked bright blue and watching. Not just a birthday, a beginning.